Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. First, I want to welcome everybody to our third virtual nutrition class. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. I am Emily, and I think everybody knows Rhonda. She's going to be presenting with me tonight, as well as the last couple classes that we've done. So we are talking tonight about how to maintain this momentum that we have gotten from the No Gain campaign. Everybody did such a great job with the No Gain campaign, really, not gaining hardly any weight, and most people lost, and the attendance was up in class. So I was really, really, really excited about the No Gain campaign this year. So thank you so much for your hard work. Thank you for keeping yourself at the top of your priority list through the holidays. That's huge. So now tonight we're going to talk about how we can keep this momentum going into the new year. So we talked about in November, our first class, we talked about sugar, carbs, junk food, eating too much food in general, and what that does to your body sort of physically. We also talked about stress and how that affects your body physically. And then last month we talked about how our emotions and our feelings and what we're thinking can affect our food choices and how we're eating and how we're acting. So we talked about how awareness of our feelings could maybe help to mitigate those emotional eating triggers and the emotional eating episodes. Tonight, like I said, let's talk about how to keep this going, how to maintain our resolve to keep these intentions that we set for the No Gain campaign through the new year so that we can just have a whole year of healthy. First of all, when we talk about New Year's resolutions, most of the time we hear how they last until the middle of January, maybe until the beginning of February. So there has to be a reason why we stop. Rhonda, do you, what are your insights? Why do you think that we stop doing what we set out to do and we stop so quickly?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's really something that it's interesting, and I'm happy we're taking some time to talk about, because I think sometimes it's easy to think, well, gosh, I'm just weak or I'm a failure. So I think one of the very first things to think about really is just, honestly, I think we're tired. At this point in the year, we made it through the holidays and we got our to-do list done and got everywhere we needed to be, and now, especially now that maybe the kids are back in school, you're back into your routine, you really haven't stopped to think, gosh, I am just tired. So that could play a big role in it. Not to mention the fact that living here in the Midwest, it's cold and it gets dark early. So it's hard to maintain a motivation when physically you're tired and then the environment tells you, go home and hibernate. So I think those two are really big physical reasons why we lose the momentum. And then I think something else I want to touch on is getting a real clear picture of your motivation. So through the No Gain campaign, which was wonderful, it was fun to have the team competition this year to keep us from gaining over the holidays, which is wonderful. So we were kind of moving away from the negative results of the holidays, which is fine. And that's a good motivation. But sometimes when you're moving away from a negative thing, it's kind of short term. So now I think it might be a good time at this point in the year to look towards something positive to keep the momentum going. For instance, through the No Gain campaign, maybe you discovered you had more energy because you were eating better and keeping the treats to a minimum and making it to the workout. So, now might be a good time to switch that to, well, let me move towards that increase in energy. Or maybe you decided, gosh, my hands aren't as dry and my skin is clear because I kept up with my hydration through the No Gain campaign. I want to keep moving towards that. So that might keep things going a little easier than just saying, I'm not going to gain weight. Let's, move towards something instead of away from something might help.
Oh, that makes complete sense. And a lot of times if you are moving away from something negative, when you do start to eat better and feel better and get your workouts in, that negative sensation isn't as strong. So you don't have as much to move away from.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to kind of go back into those old habits because you're feeling so good and you think, oh, I'm feeling so good, I can have a treat or more food or whatever it is, or not take care of myself as well. So that makes complete sense. How can we figure out where to start, to set this intention that keeps us moving forward?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And, and I think that's where it's a really good time to maybe step back and reassess your motivation. So it's easier, like I said here, I'm going to share my screen, to take a step back and figure out there's lots of things that influence motivation. So this is a wellness wheel, and I borrowed this from a Dr. Michael Arlosky. He's a doctor of clinical psychology in the wellness field. And this takes a look at all the different areas in our lives that actually impact wellness and our health. So you can see there's 9 little pieces of this pie here. And the idea here is to rate your level of satisfaction in these areas. And the closer you are to a 10, the more fulfilled you feel. And then, so I'll show you an example. Let's say, for example, I just randomly picked some numbers here in the different areas. Then the idea is to then connect the dots. So you can see if your life is this wheel, for example, you can ask yourself then, how smooth or bumpy is my life in these different areas? And then you can, ask yourself, which areas need attention? And then, which ones are you going to give some attention to now, or maybe in the near future or later? And this is just a gauge of some other areas that might be impacting your health and wellness. So you can see that health and wellness is just a little piece of the entirety of your life. So maintaining your momentum and your resolve with your health and wellness goals is impacted by, 8 other areas. So this is a tool that you could look at to see, I don't feel like getting up and going to my workouts now. Well, maybe something else is happening in another area of your life that's impacting that. Or I'm not eating as well as I used to. So then in addition to that, Emily, we were talking about how health and wellness there's a lot going on in that area alone. So one of the things that you can also do is you can take that area and you can break it up even further into, this is another wheel that you could look at with all these different areas that impact just your physical health. You can look at, diet, of course, is part of that, but we're also including things like sleep and relaxation. So, if you're not keeping your momentum, maybe it's one of these areas. And then you can break that down even further into so I'm not eating the way I want to, how else could I look at my nutrition and see if I can get more satisfaction in that piece. So there's a lot to it that you can fine tune if you find yourself falling back into those habits that you talked about earlier. So yeah, it's just a tool to use. For sure.
Well, I think that's definitely a great visual, to see in what areas, things might be high or low. Can we go back to that one that you had drawn on?
Yeah.
So to me, if I were looking at this, I would think the things that you probably have in your routine that you don't think much about that are, going well in your life, your significant other and romance, money, you're doing well with that, probably, not overspending or not, having too much stress with that, and friends. So those 3 things are probably, stuff that you have worked into your life that are habits or routines or non-negotiables that you're not willing to give up. And I think establishing those habits or routines or non-negotiables for yourself is super important, because those are things that you don't really have to think about, but you just do and you're very satisfied with. So, for me, sleep would be up pretty high because I don't willingly give up sleep, if I possibly can. I work everything I possibly can around my nighttime schedule so I can get to bed, because I just don't feel good, when I don't sleep.
Right.
Same with exercise. I definitely need it. And I need to, have some movement every day. So I make sure I look at my schedule every day and make sure I can fit it in somewhere. Quiet time is another one that's really important to me. So those 3 things, would be kind of my high ones probably not on this wheel, but maybe on the more health and wellness wheel.
Right.
But those things, I don't have to think much about it. I know when I'm starting to feel a little bit exhausted or worn out, I got to have some quiet time to recharge so that I can keep going. So those things, thinking about that and setting up those things for yourself, what's the most important to you, and what do you need the most, to live your life?
Yeah, and exactly. Some other examples might be your non-negotiables, might be your time with your kids or your family. And so you're right, you have to kind of work those around. In the holidays, it's kind of easy to be focused on those family and friends and those kinds of things that kind of go with the holidays. But, as we're coming out of the holidays, maybe those really were a non-negotiable that you want to get back into your schedule. So, yeah.
What happens if my non-negotiable is wine, 2 or more, or 1 or 2 glasses of wine every night, or if I need to sit and have a pint of ice cream every night, or my sweetened coffee and a donut in the morning? What happens if those are my non-negotiables?
Yeah. And I've heard people say that I can't give up, or my
Right.
wine or my ice cream, and I think that's a really good time to ask yourself the question, are you reaching your goals? Are those things serving you? And if they are, if that non-negotiable is serving you, then fine. But if you're not able to reach your goals, that might be the time to reassess. I know from personal experience, like the one thing that I'm sure I'm not able to give up, like my coffee. Oh, I can't give up my coffee. It's almost always it's almost always the area you need to really reassess and
Yes.
just
That's a really good point to think about those things. And if you're not getting the results you want,
Yeah.
the ice cream is more important than your goals. That's kind of what you're
That's
saying.
a good point. Yeah, it's a really good point.
So, that being said, try and experiment. We could give up the ice cream for a week, a day, a month, whatever time period, but you can see that, seeing that those things, you don't have to have them to live,
Right.
makes a big difference. And I think too, we're so busy and we go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing so many times during the day that, sometimes we don't stop to think about what, the non-negotiables really are in our life versus what, maybe we would like them to be, that would make us healthier, happier, feel better. Okay. So looking at the wheel, do we always start with these lowest ones? Like if fun is at a 2, do I have to start with fun to start working on this?
Oh, yeah, no, that's a good question, actually. Looking at the lower ones is a good idea, but, usually those are going to take a little bit more time and effort depending on what's going on. So, sometimes starting with the hardest thing is not always the best. It might be a good idea to look at one that needs some moderate attention and to get some momentum going, So, maybe you just need some more sleep to get that one going. And maybe the fun and recreation for you is involved in a lot of outdoor activities, and that's not really possible right now. So some moderate ones to get yourself some momentum going. That's just, it's just a way to look at your life in an entirety, to look at it in 360 to go with. So.
Starting with, like a middle one or an easier one reminds me of Dave Ramsey's snowball debt payoff thing, where you start with the smallest credit card bill and you pay that one off and then work your way up. And I do that with my list at work too. I if there's one thing that I've been kind of putting off and keeps getting moved from list to list, I'm really not going to start with that during the day. I'm going to start with an easy thing I can cross off and then get going.
Right. Right.
I also think, brainstorming a couple of things, like if you said fun and recreation is, and you want to be doing things outside, if you wrote down, go to Starved Rock, get outside and hike, do some fun things outside. One, you have something to look forward to. And 2, when the weather gets nice, you already have these ideas, ready. So you could brainstorm a couple things for each of these areas. And that's just, kind of thinking, but you don't actually have to even take action right off the bat. Just have something ready for when you're ready.
Yeah, great idea. That's a really good idea.
Is there ever a time that we're going to be at all, all 10 or all 9 or really small?
That'd be awesome, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
No. Yeah, no, yeah, I wish that were possible, but no, like just like with any tool, and things are going to ebb and flow depending on not only the time of year, like we talked about, maybe not being able to get outside like you want to, but also the time of life. Your health and well-being might, you might need to make some different choices based on where you are, or your career based on where your children are and what they need right now. So it's going to ebb and flow, it's just part of it. So thinking about it from that perspective makes it, I think, like I said, just a tool to use. So, but it also leads me to think of, I'm going to stop sharing here for a second. No, another reason I think we don't keep our intentions and our resolve through the holiday, I think it also comes back to habits. So again, the wellness wheel is a tool to use, but I think this is also a really good time of year to think about our habits. And it's interesting to me that going back to what I said earlier, when we're tired, our brain looks for patterns because our brain likes to conserve energy. So if you are in an old habit of, saying to yourself, well, you know what, every winter I just gain weight because it's cold and that's just the way I am, then that becomes your standard for yourself during this time of year. And that's just kind of what your brain defaults to. So, kind of investigating those and challenging those habits and figuring out maybe that's where you're starting to creep back in. And again, it could just be because you're tired and your brain's defaulting to that for this time of year. I think for women, we don't like to ask for help. And so, again, that could just be another habit, another default switch that got switched on, after the holidays when we're again tired. And sometimes I know for me personally, it comes back to like some negative self-talk coming back in. And again, for me, that comes back to, I'm tired. And so my brain starts to go into that old pattern. So it's just something to keep in mind as well.
Which is why sleep is one of my non-negotiables, for sure.
Yes.
The negative self-talk we've talked about a little bit too in the last couple classes with the loop that we've been telling ourselves forever. The story we've always told ourselves.
Yeah.
Could be fear of failure too. A lot of times, you don't want to start if you're not going to finish it, whether you're going to keep yourself first on that priority list, or if you've tried every diet. It's hard to start again if you want to lose weight and try again when over and over you've done it and maybe it has or hasn't worked. So those are all very valid, but kind of realizing why you're doing it is super important if you want to move forward and change something going forward.
Exactly.
So how do we make, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and using those maybe past failures as a learning tool, and not, instead of saying that they're not failures, they're just a way I've learned, and I can use that information right here. So
that's a great way to turn it around. Yes. Yeah. So I think the ideal is making, our intention into our lifestyle. How are we going to do that?
Yeah. And that's really the key. I mean, I think for life, not just for 2019, but forever. Right. So I think, getting in tune with the real motivation, I think is key for all of us. Now, the No Gain campaign was wonderful competition. It kind of gets you started. All competitions like that are great for that. But to keep it going for the long run, you really have to tap into that real motivation and what moves you forward. And I know, for years and years, I wanted to lose weight. I was overweight as a child, overweight as a young adult. And that was like the thing that I just didn't seem to be able to get past. But once I somehow came up with the idea that I was about midway through my entire life, and I thought, gosh, I want to know what it feels like to be a normal sized person, because I had never experienced that. That motivation felt so different to me that it kind of helped. It propelled me into sticking with it. When one thing didn't work, I was determined to make something else work. So I think getting in tune with that real motivation is key in the long run for everyone. And then sometimes that leads to answering the hard questions. Maybe things in your life need to be different. And that's when I think going back to that wellness 360 wheel can help maybe pinpoint some of those areas of your life that are out of balance. And maybe there are some hard questions that over time need to be answered there. And then that kind of, for me, goes back to habits too. Maybe you've gotten into certain habits in your relationship that maybe you need to reassess, or certain habits with your money or your career. So kind of all goes together for me in that regard.
I think it goes all together for all of us,
Yeah.
for sure. And, for me, being gentle with yourself when you're asking those hard questions is so important.
Good point. Yeah.
Talking about the negative self-talk, and we're very judgmental to ourselves.
Yeah.
We criticize ourselves a lot. So if you ask yourself a hard question and an answer comes back, think about it. Give yourself some time to kind of think about that, and maybe that is the thing that needs to change. Even if it is hard, it's worth it. It's worth the work.
Right.
And then also, thinking about your whole life. It's not just about wellness, whether eating, exercising, and stress relieving.
Right.
It's about what's going on at home, what's going on at work, what's going on with your friends and your family, and all of those things. So look at your whole life, because you may increase one and it's going to spill over into other things, your career, your finances, your relationships, all of those things.
Absolutely.
So it's not just I'm going to eat healthy and everything's going to be better. It's the whole thing, so looking at it from that whole with that wheel is I think that's such a great tool.
Yeah. I'll put that in the chat box, and then I'll add it to the Facebook group as well for people, so they can just take a look at it.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So, tonight we talked about wanting to keep this motivation going. Think about those real reasons why we stop that we talked about at the beginning, whether it's weather, cold, dark, or you're really tired after the holidays, because those are real reasons. And, your body needs sleep. It's absolutely essential for life. So if you're tired and you need more sleep, that's something, to address. It's not something to beat yourself up over. And then also, like Rhonda said, looking at that real motivation, finding out, what you really want, instead of chasing, what you think you want, whether it's like a number on the scale or, whatever the goal might be. Find what the motivation, the underlying motivation is. And that's what will keep you going, which is great to work for. And then also, thinking about what we talked about in the last two classes with what we're eating, how much we're eating at one time, the sugar, and the stress, because eating too much sugar, junk food, carbs, even just food in general, causes us to want more. It causes us to have more cravings. So watch your portion sizes, maybe cut back on that sugar, and then you'll naturally feel better. You'll naturally have less cravings, and you'll have more energy. So those things, they all work hand in hand, but keeping that in mind too, because like you said, it's not just, it's not just the one thing, it all goes together. And then also your emotions, work on feeling those emotions like we talked about in the second class, and being aware that, they can change how you're acting and how you're feeling and what you're eating. So look for that balance, in your life, and it all, kind of spills over into each other.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yep. It is all about balance. So, yeah, that's great.
Okay. Well, I hope that you got some information tonight that you can use on how to keep this ball rolling. We will take questions if anybody has any. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you being here. Have a great night.
Thanks. Okay.
Thank you.